The stagecoach lurched to a stop, and Evelyn Mercer's stomach lurched with it. She'd been traveling for 11 days, first by train through endless prairie, then by stage across roads that barely deserved the name. Her traveling dress, once a respectable shade of deep blue, now carried the dust of 3 territories. Her hands ached from gripping the seat during the worst jolts, and her spine felt permanently compressed from sleeping upright against wooden walls that shook with every mile. But none of that mattered now, because through the window she could see Dry Hollow. The town looked exactly like the letter promised, and nothing like she'd hoped. A single dirt street lined with weathered buildings that all leaned slightly, as if tired of standing upright. A general store with a faded sign. A saloon that seemed too large for the population. A church with a cross that tilted to the left. And people, dusty, sun-hardened people who stopped what they were doing to watch the stage arrive. Evelyn's fingers found the envelope in her pocket, the paper soft from constant handling. The marriage letter. Her ticket to a new life. Dear Miss Mercer, I am a merchant of good standing in Dry Hollow, seeking a woman of moral character and domestic skill. If you are willing to travel west and begin a new life as my wife, I can promise you security, respectability, and a comfortable home. Yours in anticipation, Robert Dalton. She'd read it 40 times if she'd read it once, memorized every word, built entire conversations in her head with the man who'd written it, Robert Dalton. Even his name sounded solid, dependable. The stage driver climbed down with a grunt, and a moment later, the door swung open. Dry Hollow, miss. End of the line. Evelyn accepted his hand and stepped down into the street. The sun hit her like a physical weight, nothing like the gentle warmth back east. This was different, relentless, exposing. It found every dark thread of her dress and heated them until she felt wrapped in wool despite the cotton. She carried 1 trunk and 1 carpet bag. Everything she owned, everything she'd been able to salvage after her father's debts consumed the rest. Need help with the trunk, miss? No, thank you. Someone's meeting me. At least she hoped someone was meeting her. The letter had specified the date, but not the time. She scanned the small crowd that had gathered. Men in dusty work clothes, women with sharp eyes, children who stared openly. You the mail-order bride? The voice came from her right. Evelyn turned to find a woman in her 50s, arms crossed, expression somewhere between curious and skeptical. I'm here to meet Mr. Robert Dalton. Robert Dalton? The woman's eyebrows climbed. That's interesting. Something in her tone sent ice through Evelyn's chest despite the heat. Is something wrong? Depends on your definition. The woman nodded toward the general store. That's him there. The one in the brown vest. Evelyn followed her gaze and saw a man standing in the store's shadow. Medium height, thinning hair, somewhere in his 40s. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. She lifted her skirts and crossed the street, pulse hammering in her throat. This was it. The moment everything changed. Mr. Dalton? Up close she could see the sweat on his forehead, the way his eyes wouldn't quite meet hers. He glanced past her shoulder, then back, then away again. Miss Mercer, you're here. Yes. She tried to smile, but her mouth felt strange. The journey was long, but I'm very glad to finally... I can't marry you. The words hit her like cold water. I'm sorry? I can't. He took a step back, hands raised as if she might attack him. I thought I could, I truly did, but There's been a complication, a development. I can't go through with it. The street seemed to tilt. Evelyn's carpet bag slipped from her fingers and hit the dirt with a soft thump. I don't understand. We've been corresponding for months. You sent for me. I know, and I apologize, truly, but circumstances have changed. He was backing away now, actually backing away from her in front of the entire town. Martha Hendricks, you don't know her, but she's local, respectable family. Her father owns land adjacent to my store, and when he offered, well, it made business sense to... Business sense. Evelyn heard her own voice as if from a distance. You're refusing to marry me because of business. It's not personal. But his eyes said otherwise. They said he'd looked at her and found her wanting, found her dusty and tired and too plain for whatever image he'd built in his head. I'll pay for your return passage, naturally. It's the least I can... Mr. Dalton. A new voice, female, cutting through his stammering like a knife. A young woman appeared beside him, blonde and fresh-looking in a dress that hadn't seen 11 days of travel. Is this her? Martha, I was just... You've explained the situation? Martha looked Evelyn up and down with the kind of assessment usually reserved for livestock. It's nothing against you personally, of course, but surely you understand that local connections take precedence. Robert and I have known each other since childhood. It simply makes more sense. Evelyn stood frozen, some distant part of her brain noting that Martha's dress had lace at the collar. Real lace, not the cheap stuff, that her hands were smooth and uncalloused, that she smiled with the confidence of someone who'd never been desperate enough to cross half a continent for a stranger's promise. Of course, Evelyn heard herself say, I understand perfectly. She didn't understand anything. She bent and retrieved her carpetbag with hands that trembled. The return stage leaves tomorrow morning, Robert said, relief flooding his voice. I'll make arrangements. That won't be necessary. But you'll need... I said it won't be necessary. Evelyn lifted her chin, drawing on reserves of pride she didn't know she had left. Thank you for your time, Mr. Dalton. She turned and walked away before her legs could give out. Behind her, she heard Martha's voice, bright and carrying. Well, that was easier than expected. Shall we go look at table linens? The street stretched before her like an accusation, 20 yards to the boarding house with the rooms available sign. 20 yards while every eye in Dry Hollow watched the rejected mail-order bride limp toward whatever came next. She made it 15 yards before her vision blurred, 10 yards before the first tear fell. 5 yards before she understood, truly understood, that she had $7 to her name and nowhere to go. The boarding house room cost 50 cents a night. Evelyn sat on the narrow bed and did the arithmetic. 14 nights, if she ate nothing. 7, if she ate once a day. 4 or 5, if she was reasonable. Then what? The trunk sat unopened beside her, all her worldly possessions, and none of them worth enough to matter. Some clothes, mostly practical. The quilt her mother had made, too precious to sell. A few books she should probably sell but wouldn't. The silver locket with her parents' portraits, the last thing of value. But she'd starve before she gave that up. She'd been stupid. So incredibly stupid. Coming west had cost everything. Train fare, stage fare, the small bribes needed to secure a spot, the travel necessities she'd had to purchase along the way. She'd spent her last real money on a decent dress for meeting Robert, the blue one that now looked tired and presumptuous, hanging on the room's single hook. I thought I'd be married by now, she thought stupidly. I thought I'd be sitting in someone's home, drinking tea, planning our life together. Instead, she was calculating how long until destitution. A knock on the door made her jump. Miss Mercer? A woman's voice, different from the one in the street. My name is Sarah Winters. I run the boarding house. May I speak with you? Evelyn wiped her eyes quickly and opened the door. The woman standing there was younger than expected, maybe 30, with dark hair and kind eyes that took in Evelyn's tear-stained face without comment. I wanted to welcome you properly, Sarah said, and to say that I'm sorry about what happened with Robert Dalton. The whole town's talking about it, which I'm sure makes it worse. Does everyone know? In a town this size, they knew before you finished talking to him. Sarah's expression was sympathetic. Small communities are like that. News travels faster than wildfire. But I also wanted to tell you that there are other options. Evelyn's stomach clenched. Options? 2 other men placed advertisements for mail-order brides. They're both expecting women who haven't arrived yet. If you're interested, I could make introductions. It was logical, practical, exactly what any sensible person would do, and the thought made Evelyn want to vomit. She swallowed hard. Yes, thank you. That's very kind. There's a social this evening at the church. Nothing fancy, just an excuse for people to gather and talk. Both men will be there. It might be a good opportunity. After Sarah left, Evelyn sat back down on the bed and stared at the wall. She could do this. She'd traveled this far, risked this much. What was a little more pride? She unpacked her second-best dress, the green one with the neat waist and modest neckline, splashed water on her face from the basin, pinned her hair carefully, hiding the places where it was coming loose from 11 days of travel. When she looked in the mirror above the washstand, she saw a woman who looked presentable, respectable, desperate. She looked away. Done. The church social was exactly what Sarah had described. Nothing fancy, but it filled the small building with noise and bodies and the particular energy of people determined to have a good time despite limited resources. Evelyn stood near the entrance, hands folded, trying not to look like what she was, the rejected bride hoping for scraps.
"There you are." Sarah appeared at her elbow, bringing with her a man who looked to be in his late 30s, tall and thin, with nervous hands that kept adjusting his collar. "This is Daniel Webster. Daniel, this is Miss Evelyn Mercer, the young lady I told you about." Daniel's handshake was damp. "Miss Mercer, Sarah mentioned you were recently arrived." "Yes, just today." "From back east?" "Pennsylvania."
Ah. He nodded as if this meant something. "And you're looking for... That is, I placed an advertisement some months ago, and I'm still waiting for a response, so if you're interested in possibly..." He trailed off, waiting for her to fill the silence. Evelyn forced a smile. "I'd be happy to speak with you about your situation, Mr. Webster." What followed was the most excruciating 20 minutes of her life. Daniel talked without pause, a nervous stream of information about his carpentry business, his small house on the edge of town, his late mother who'd passed 2 years ago, his need for someone to cook and clean and manage the household. Not once did he ask about her. Not once did he look directly at her face, and when Mrs. Henderson walked past, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes, Daniel's gaze followed her with an expression that made Evelyn's stomach sink. "Mr. Webster," she said, interrupting his description of his kitchen. "Do you know Mrs. Henderson well?" He flushed. We're acquainted." "She's very handsome." "I suppose." The flush deepened. "But she's not interested in remarriage. She's made that quite clear, which is why I placed the advertisement, you understand. A man needs a wife. It's not proper, living alone. People talk." "And you'd rather have me than nothing," Evelyn thought. "But you'd take her in a heartbeat if she'd have you." "I appreciate your candor, Mr. Webster." She kept her voice level. "Perhaps we should both take some time to consider whether we'd be well suited." Relief flooded his face. Yes, that's wise. Take your time." He escaped toward the refreshment table so fast he nearly knocked over a child. Sarah reappeared, this time with a shorter man in his 50s, barrel-chested and red-faced. "Miss Mercer, this is Thomas Garrett. Thomas, Miss Mercer is newly arrived and interested in learning about our community." Thomas looked her over with the assessment of a buyer at market. "You're a bit scrawny. Can you cook?" Evelyn blinked. "Yes." "Clean?" "Of course." "Sew?" "Adequately." "Milk a cow?" I could learn." He crossed his arms. "I've got a ranch 5 miles out. Run it myself, but I'm not getting younger. Need someone who can work, not some delicate thing that'll faint in the sun." "You faint easy?" "No." "Good. Can't abide fainters." He leaned closer, and she smelled whiskey on his breath. "I'm offering room and board, respectability, and my name. In return, I expect a clean house, decent meals, and no complaints about the work. Think you can handle that?" Every word felt like a reduction, a diminishment of what she'd hoped marriage might be. "I think," Evelyn said carefully, "that I'd like to know more about what you're looking for in a wife, beyond the work." Thomas snorted. "Looking for?" "I'm looking for help, Miss Mercer. My last hired hand quit and I can't afford another. A wife makes more sense, costs less for one thing, and it's legal." "Legal." She repeated the word flatly. "Marriage contract. You'd be bound to the ranch, same as if I'd signed you on as labor." He said it like it was reasonable, like this was a selling point. No running off when the work gets hard. That's worth something. "I see. So? You interested or not? Don't have all night." The words came out before she could stop them. "No, Mr. Garrett, I don't believe I am." His face darkened. "You turning me down? I'm saying we wouldn't suit." "Wouldn't suit." He barked a laugh. "You hear that, Sarah? She wouldn't suit. Bit picky for a woman with no prospects, aren't you?" The conversation around them had stopped. People were watching now, pretending not to, but listening to every word. "Thomas," Sarah said sharply, "that's enough. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. She comes here, turns down Robert Dalton, or he turns her down, depending on who's telling it, tries to pick up Daniel Webster, and now she's too good for me? What exactly is she waiting for? Evelyn's face burned. I'm not waiting for anything. Simply what? Simply hoping some rich rancher is going to show up and rescue you? This is Dry Hollow, honey. We don't have rich ranchers. We have men who work hard and need wives who'll do the same. If you're not willing to do that, you might as well take the stage back east. The silence that followed was absolute. Evelyn stood frozen, aware that every person in the church was watching her humiliation. 3 rejections, 3 public, witnessed rejections in the space of 6 hours. Excuse me, she whispered. She walked out of the church on legs that felt disconnected from her body. Behind her, conversation exploded. Voices raised in gossip, in judgment, in the particular excitement of people watching someone else's disaster. The evening air hit her like mercy. She gulped it in, pressed her hand against the church's rough wood wall, and tried not to fall apart. That was brutal. The voice came from the shadows beside the church. Evelyn spun and saw a woman leaning against the wall, half hidden in darkness. Young, maybe 25, wearing a dress that had been expensive once but was now carefully mended. I'm sorry? Thomas Garrett. The woman stepped forward, and lamplight from the church window caught her face, sharp features, knowing eyes. He's always been mean when he drinks, and he always drinks at socials. You handled it better than most would. I don't feel like I handled it at all. You didn't cry until you got outside. That's something. The woman extended her hand. Grace Miller. I run the dress shop, such as it is. Evelyn Mercer. I know. Everyone knows. Grace's smile was wry. Welcome to Dry Hollow, where your business becomes everyone's business before you even finish conducting it. I heard about Robert Dalton. He's an idiot. He made a choice. He made a coward's choice. Grace pulled a cigarette from her pocket, lit it with a practiced motion. Martha Hendricks comes with land and connections. You come with yourself. In towns like this, connections win. So I'm learning. Here's what else you should learn. Daniel Webster is pining for Mrs. Henderson and always will be. He'll marry someone else out of obligation, then spend the rest of his life being disappointed. Thomas Garrett wants free labor with legal binding, and Robert Dalton just taught you that promises mean nothing when better options appear. Evelyn leaned against the wall beside her. Why are you telling me this? Because I was you, 3 years ago. Different circumstances, same desperation. Grace took a drag, exhaled slowly. I came here running from a bad situation, thinking frontier life would be freedom. Instead, I found different chains. Lighter maybe, but chains nonetheless. So what did you do? Opened a shop. Stopped looking for rescue and started building something I could control. She glanced at Evelyn. You have any skills besides the usual domestic ones? I can keep books. My father ran a store before he died. I helped with the accounts. Can you add numbers quickly? Without paper? Evelyn nodded. Interesting. Grace dropped the cigarette and ground it under her heel. The general store needs a clerk. Warren Hutchins, who runs it, is getting old, and his eyesight's failing. He won't admit it, but he's been making mistakes in the accounts. If you could prove you're good with numbers, he might hire you. I don't have money to survive while I'm proving myself. Sarah would probably extend your credit at the boarding house if you explained the situation. She's soft-hearted that way. Grace studied her. Or you could go back inside and try to convince Thomas Garrett you've reconsidered. I'm sure he'd take you back if you apologized properly. The thought made Evelyn's skin crawl. I'll talk to Mr. Hutchins tomorrow. Good. Grace pushed off the wall. I should go back in before people think I'm out here smoking, which I obviously am, but they don't need to witness it. You coming? No, I think I'll walk for a bit. Suit yourself, but don't wander far. Dry Hollow's safe enough, but there's wildlife, and not all of it has 4 legs. After Grace left, Evelyn stood alone in the darkness, listening to the muffled sounds of the social continuing without her. Piano music, laughter, the buzz of conversation. She should go back to the boarding house. Conserve her energy, plan for tomorrow's conversation with Mr. Hutchins. Instead, she walked. The town was small enough that she reached its edge in minutes. Beyond the last building, prairie stretched endlessly, vast and dark under a sky scattered with more stars than she'd ever seen. The wind carried unfamiliar scents, sage, dust, something wild she couldn't name. This was supposed to be her new beginning. Her escape from Philadelphia's cramped boarding houses and pitying looks. Her chance to build something that mattered. Instead, she'd traded one kind of desperation for another. "You're the mail order bride." Evelyn turned so fast she stumbled. A man stood 10 feet away, emerging from the darkness like he'd been part of it. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing work clothes and a hat that shadowed his face. Something about the way he stood, weight on one leg, arms loose, suggested a man accustomed to violence even if he wasn't currently offering it. Yes. Heard you had some trouble today." His voice was low, rough, like he didn't use it often. 3 rejections. That some kind of record? Humiliation flooded through her, hot and sharp. "If you've come to mock me," not mocking, observing. He took a step closer, and lamplight from a distant building caught the hard planes of his face. Weathered, maybe 40, with eyes that seemed to see more than she wanted to show. "You're staying at Sarah's boarding house?" "I don't see how that's your concern." "It's not, but I have a proposition, and I'd like to make it before you leave town." "I'm not interested in propositions, Mr. Ward." "Caleb Ward." He removed his hat, and she saw his face clearly for the first time. Not handsome exactly, but strong, serious, the face of someone who'd forgotten how to smile. "I have a ranch about 12 miles north, Ward Creek, if you've heard of it." "I haven't." "Most people haven't. It's remote, poor ground, barely profitable." He said it without inflection, stating facts. "I have 2 children, twins, age 7. They lost their mother last year." Something in his voice when he said mother made Evelyn's throat tighten. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Are you?" He studied her face. "Or are you just being polite?" The question was so unexpected, so blunt that she answered honestly. "Both, I suppose." "Fair enough." Caleb turned his hat in his hands. "The children need a woman's care. The ranch needs managing. I need help. You need a home. You're proposing marriage. I'm proposing an arrangement." He met her eyes, and she saw something there she hadn't seen in any of the other men. Honesty, maybe, or exhaustion. "No false promises, no romance. You'd work hard. So would I. In return, you'd have shelter, food, and my name. The children would have someone to care for them. It's not pretty, but it's practical." "I see." Her heart was hammering. "And what makes you think I'd be interested in such an arrangement?" "Because you're still here." He gestured to the darkness around them. "You could have gone back inside, apologized to Thomas Garrett, secured yourself a husband no matter how unpleasant. Instead, you walked away from the only shelter you're likely to find. That tells me you've got standards. Also tells me you're running out of options." It should have offended her. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing anyone had said all day. "I don't know you, Mr. Ward." "No. And I don't know you. But I know you traveled across the frontier alone. Know you survived 3 public rejections without falling apart. Know you're still standing here talking to me instead of crying in your room." He put his hat back on. "That's enough for me to make an offer. Whether it's enough for you to accept is your choice." "I'd need time to consider." "You have until dawn. That's when I'm leaving, with or without you." He started to turn away, then stopped. "One more thing. My children, Nora and Eli, they're still grieving. They might never stop grieving. If you come to Ward Creek, you won't be replacing their mother. You'll be surviving alongside us. If that's not something you can handle, say no now." Then he walked away, disappearing into the darkness as suddenly as he'd appeared. Evelyn stood frozen, her mind racing. An arrangement, not a marriage. Honesty, not promises. Survival, not romance. It was everything she'd been taught to reject. Practical, cold, transactional. It was nothing like what she'd hoped for when she'd boarded that train in Philadelphia. It was also the only real offer she had. She walked back to the boarding house slowly, turning Caleb Ward's words over in her mind. By the time she reached her room, she'd made a decision she knew would either save her or destroy her. There was no sleeping that night. She packed her trunk by candlelight, folding each garment carefully, trying not to think too hard about what she was doing. The green dress, the blue dress, the practical gray one she'd been saving, the underthing she'd mended so many times the fabric was more patch than original material. The quilt, her books, her mother's locket. Everything she was, everything she had left. At midnight, she pulled out paper and pen and wrote 2 letters. The first was to her aunt in Philadelphia, the only family she had left. Dear Aunt Margaret, I've arrived safely in Dry Hollow and have accepted a position managing a ranch household. Please don't worry, I'm doing what I must. With love, Evelyn. The second was to herself, though she wouldn't mail it, just words on paper, a record of this moment before everything changed. I am not a coward. I am not desperate. I am making a choice. And if it's the wrong choice, at least it will be mine. She folded the letter and tucked it into her mother's journal, between pages that had been blank since the funeral. Dawn came slowly, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. Evelyn watched it through her window, dressed in her traveling clothes, trunk packed and ready beside the door. When the first real light touched the street, she carried her trunk downstairs. Sarah was in the kitchen, making coffee. You're up early. I'm leaving. Evelyn set the trunk down carefully. I'm going to Ward Creek Ranch with Mr. Caleb Ward. I'd appreciate it if you'd tell Mr. Hutchins I'm sorry I won't be able to inquire about the clerk position. Sarah's eyebrows rose. Caleb Ward? You're sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. He's a hard man. His wife's death. It changed him. I imagine losing your spouse would change anyone. It's not just that. Sarah poured coffee into 2 cups, handed one to Evelyn. Anna, his wife. She was the heart of that family. Warm, loving, everything Caleb isn't. When she died, it was like the light went out of Ward Creek. The children withdrew. Caleb stopped coming to town except for supplies. I'm not sure what you're walking into, but it won't be easy. Nothing about my life has been easy, Mrs. Winters. At least this time I'll have a roof over my head while I'm struggling. A wagon pulled up outside, and through the window Evelyn saw Caleb Ward climb down. He moved like someone who carried weight she couldn't see, all his grace ground down to pure function. That's him, she said unnecessarily. Sarah walked her to the door. If it doesn't work out, if you need to leave, come back here. I'll help you however I can. Thank you. Evelyn picked up her carpet bag, and Sarah grabbed the trunk. Together they carried her belongings outside. Caleb was waiting beside the wagon, his expression unreadable. When he saw them, he lifted the trunk into the back without greeting, securing it with practiced efficiency. You ready? He asked. Yes. It's a 3-hour ride. Rough road most of the way. If you need to stop, say so. I'll be fine. He helped her up to the wagon seat. His hand was rough, calloused, impersonal, then climbed up beside her. The wagon seat was narrow enough that their shoulders almost touched. Mr. Ward, Sarah called from the doorway. Take care of her. Caleb nodded once, then clicked his tongue. The horses moved forward. They left Dry Hollow as the sun cleared the horizon, the town waking behind them. Evelyn didn't look back. There was nothing there she wanted to see. For the first hour, neither of them spoke. The wagon creaked, the horses plodded, and the prairie stretched out in all directions like an accusation. Finally, Caleb said, You should know what you're getting into. I thought you explained it. I told you the basics. I didn't tell you about the isolation. Ward Creek is 12 miles from town, and the road's bad enough that we only make the trip when necessary. Sometimes that's weekly. Sometimes it's monthly. The nearest neighbor is 4 miles south, and they keep to themselves. I understand. Do you? He glanced at her. You're from a city. Philadelphia, someone said. You're used to people, noise, activity. Ward Creek has none of that. It's quiet in a way that gets inside your head, makes you hear things that aren't there. Some people can't handle it. And if I can't, then we'll have a problem. He adjusted the reins. But we'll deal with it when it happens, not before. Another mile passed. The children, Evelyn said. Tell me about them. Something shifted in Caleb's posture, a tightening she felt more than saw. Nora talks too much. Eli doesn't talk at all, not since Anna died. He used to be loud, always running, always laughing. Now he's silent, just watches everything with those big eyes and never says a word. And Nora? She talks because she's terrified of silence, fills every moment with words like, if she stops, something terrible will happen. His jaw worked. Maybe she's right. Silence is when you remember things you'd rather forget. What was your wife like? That's not your concern. The words were harsh, but Evelyn heard the pain underneath. She let the subject drop. The landscape gradually changed as they traveled. The flat prairie gave way to rolling hills, then to rougher country, rocky outcroppings, sparse trees, land that looked like it fought back against anyone trying to work it. "This is Ward Creek land," Caleb said as they crested a hill. 200 acres, half of it barely good for grazing, the other half worse. "Then why ranch here?" "Because it's what I have." He said it simply, without self-pity. "My father homesteaded this land 30 years ago, broke his back trying to make it profitable. I inherited the ranch and the debt. I'm still trying to make it work." The ranch house appeared ahead, nestled in a shallow valley beside a creek that was more promise than reality. It was smaller than Evelyn expected. 1 story, weathered wood, a porch that sagged slightly on one end. A barn stood nearby, equally tired. A chicken coop, a well, a vegetable garden gone half to seed. It looked lonely. That was the word that came to her. The whole place looked lonely, like it had been abandoned even though people still lived there. Caleb stopped the wagon in front of the house. "This is it. Last chance to change your mind. If you want to go back, say so now." Evelyn looked at the house, at the empty porch, at the curtains hanging crooked in the windows. She thought about Dry Hollow and Thomas Garrett's proposition, about Philadelphia and the debt collectors who'd taken everything, about all the choices she'd made that led to this moment. "I'm not going back." "Then let's get you settled." He climbed down and helped her from the wagon. His hands were impersonal again, just function, no feeling. The front door opened and 2 children appeared. The girl, Nora, was small for 7, with tangled brown hair and a dress that was clean but poorly mended. She stared at Evelyn with eyes that seemed too large for her face. The boy, Eli, stood behind his sister, half hidden, watching. He had his father's build, solid even at 7, and the same serious expression. But his eyes held something that made Evelyn's chest ache. Loss, pure, unfiltered loss. "Nora Eli," Caleb said. "This is Miss Evelyn Mercer. She's going to be staying with us, helping out around the ranch." "Are you going to be our new mama?" Nora asked immediately. The question hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn glanced at Caleb, who was suddenly very interested in unhitching the horses. "I'm going to help your father, that's all." "But Papa said he was getting married. That's what people said in town, that Papa was looking for a new wife because Mama died and we need someone to—" "Nora." Caleb's voice was quiet but firm. "Help Miss Mercer with her things. Show her the house." Nora's mouth snapped shut. She reached for Evelyn's carpet bag with small hands. "This way." The house was dim inside, curtains drawn against the sun. Evelyn's eyes adjusted slowly, taking in details. A main room with a fireplace, rough furniture that was functional but graceless. A kitchen area with a stove and table. Doors leading to what must be bedrooms. Everything clean but joyless, like someone going through the motions without remembering why. "This is where Mama used to cook," Nora said, pointing to the stove. "She made bread every Tuesday. Papa tries, but his bread is hard." "Do you make bread?" "Yes." "Good bread?" "I suppose that depends on who's judging." "I'm judging. I'm very hungry for good bread." Nora set down the carpet bag. "That's Mama and Papa's room. But Mama's not in there anymore because she's dead. Papa sleeps there alone now. You'll sleep. Where will you sleep?" Evelyn had no idea. She looked toward the door where Caleb had just entered, carrying her trunk. "The room at the end of the hall," he said. "It's small, but it's yours." Small was generous. The room held a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk-sized space of floor. A single window looked out on the barn, but it was private, and it was hers, and right now that felt like luxury. "Thank you." Caleb set the trunk down with a thud. "Supper's at 6. We work until then. If you need anything, ask." He paused in the doorway. "And Miss Mercer?" "The children call me Papa or Father. You can call me Caleb. We're not formal here." Then he was gone, his boots heavy on the floor, the door closing behind him. Nora remained, watching Evelyn with unnerving intensity. "Are you going to stay?" the girl asked. Yes. I'm going to stay." "Promise?" The word was so raw, so desperate, that Evelyn found herself kneeling to meet Nora's eyes. "I promise I'm not going to leave without telling you first. Is that fair?" Nora considered this, then nodded slowly. "Mama didn't tell us. She was just sick, and then she was gone. Eli won't talk because he's waiting for her to come back, but she won't. I know she won't, but he doesn't believe me. Maybe he just needs time. Papa says that too. But how much time? It's been forever. A year, Evelyn thought. A year was forever when you were 7 and your mother had died. I don't know, she said honestly. But we'll figure it out together, all right? Nora's eyes filled with tears she clearly refused to shed. Okay. Then she turned and ran from the room, her footsteps light and quick down the hall. Evelyn sank onto the bed and looked around her new home. Small room, broken family, impossible situation, and absolutely nowhere else to go. She unpacked her trunk mechanically, hanging her dresses on the room's 3 hooks, placing her mother's quilt on the bed, setting her books on the windowsill. When everything was arranged, the room still looked empty. Not unwelcoming, just empty. Like it was waiting for something to fill it. Through the window, she could see Caleb in the barn, moving with purpose, doing whatever work had to be done. Eli sat on the fence nearby, silent and watching. Nora was nowhere visible, probably off filling silence with words in some corner of the ranch. This was her life now. Evelyn pressed her hand against the glass, feeling the warmth of the sun through it, and wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake, or the only choice that made sense. Then she heard Nora's voice from the kitchen. Miss Evelyn, can you really make bread? Because I'm very, very hungry. And despite everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the rawness of walking into someone else's grief, Evelyn smiled. Yes, Nora, I can make bread. She left the room and went to meet whatever came next. The bread dough fought back. Evelyn had been kneading for 10 minutes, and the flour-water mixture still felt wrong, too sticky in some places, too dry in others. She added more flour, worked it in, felt the resistance under her palms. Behind her, Nora sat at the table, swinging her legs and talking. Mama used to let the dough rise by the window. She said the sun helped. Do you think the sun helps? I think it does. Everything grows better in the sun, except mushrooms. Papa says mushrooms like the dark. Have you ever seen a mushroom farm? I haven't, but I think it would be scary. All those mushrooms growing in the dark like... Nora, Evelyn kept her voice gentle. Could you fetch me some water? The bucket's getting low. Oh, yes, I can do that. The girl hopped down and grabbed the bucket with both hands. I'm very good at carrying water. Mama taught me. She said it's important to carry carefully so you don't spill, but sometimes I spill anyway, and Papa says it's all right because I'm still learning, but I think I should be better at it by now because I'm 7, and 7 is... The door closed behind her, cutting off the stream of words. Silence rushed in like water filling a hole. Evelyn worked the dough, listening to the quiet. Through the window, she could see Eli still perched on the fence, watching his father repair something in the barn. The boy hadn't moved in over an hour, just sat there, silent and still, like he was carved from the same wood as the fence posts. The dough finally came together, smooth and elastic under her hands. She shaped it into a ball, placed it in the bowl, covered it with a cloth. The familiar motion steadied her. This, at least, she knew how to do. The kitchen was clean but showed signs of male management. Supplies organized by function rather than logic. A stack of plates that didn't match. Cups with chips nobody had bothered to fix. Everything serviceable, nothing cared for. She was wiping down the table when Caleb came in, bringing the smell of hay and sweat. Bread? He asked, nodding at the covered bowl. It needs to rise. It'll be ready for supper. He poured water from the pitcher, drank half the cup in one swallow. Nora talking your ear off? She's enthusiastic. That's one word for it. He refilled the cup. She wasn't always like that. Before Anna died, she was quiet, thoughtful. Now she talks like if she stops, the world might end. Maybe that's how she's coping. Maybe. He set down the cup. The chickens need feeding, eggs need collecting, garden needs weeding, though most of it's beyond saving this season. Kitchen supplies are low. I was planning to go into town next week, but if you need something sooner, make a list. I'll manage. There's also... He stopped, jaw working like he was chewing words before spitting them out. There's Anna's things. Her clothes. Her personal items. They're still in the bedroom. I couldn't... You want me to pack them away. I want them gone. The words came out harsh. Not thrown out, just somewhere I don't see them every morning.
Evelyn nodded. I'll take care of it.
Not today. Do it when the kids are outside. Nora doesn't need to see. He moved toward the door, then stopped. The marriage. We should do it soon. This week, if possible. I'll arrange for Pastor Williams to come out. It doesn't need to be anything formal. Just the legal part. Her stomach clenched. Of course. You have any objections to that? She had about 100 objections, starting with the fact that she barely knew him and ending with the reality that she was agreeing to marry a man who'd made it clear this was a transaction, not a union. But what she said was, no objections. Good. He left without another word, the door clicking shut behind him. Evelyn stood in the empty kitchen, surrounded by mismatched dishes and the smell of rising bread, and wondered what she'd actually agreed to. The afternoon passed in a blur of small tasks. She fed the chickens, which scattered and complained like she'd personally offended them, collected eggs from nests that hadn't been cleaned properly in weeks, pulled weeds from the garden until her back ached and her hands were dirt-stained. Nora followed her everywhere, talking. That chicken's name is Henrietta. Papa named her. I wanted to call her Princess, but Papa said chickens don't need fancy names. Do you think chickens care about their names? I think they do. Henrietta always comes when I call her. Well, sometimes. When she wants to. Chickens are very independent. Mama used to say... She stopped abruptly, her face crumpling. Evelyn straightened from the garden, wiping her hands on her apron. What did your mama use to say? She said Henrietta was bossy, like me. Nora's voice went small. Am I bossy? You're assertive. There's a difference. What's the difference? Bossy is telling people what to do because you want control. Assertive is knowing what you need and asking for it. Evelyn knelt beside her. You're not bossy, Nora. You're just trying to fill up the quiet. Eli says I talk too much. Eli talks? Sometimes, when it's just us. But never around Papa. Never around anyone else. Nora kicked at a rock. He thinks if he's quiet enough, Mama might hear him. Like she's listening from wherever she went. The words hit Evelyn square in the chest. She'd heard similar things from children back in Philadelphia after her father died. The magical thinking that grief brought. The bargains they made with a universe that didn't bargain back. Nora, your mama. I know she's not coming back. The girl's voice was fierce. I know that. But Eli doesn't. Or he does, but he won't believe it. And Papa won't talk about her at all, so it's like she's just gone. Like she was never here. She was here. The fact that you remember her means she was here. But nobody says her name. Papa won't. The people in town whisper about her, but never to us. It's like everyone wants to forget. Evelyn had no answer for that. She pulled another weed, adding it to the pile. They worked in silence for a few minutes. Then Nora said quietly, Do you think Papa will forget her? No, I don't think he'll ever forget her. Do you think he'll forget to be sad? That was harder to answer. Evelyn chose her words carefully. I think the sadness might change shape, get smaller, but it won't disappear. Good. Nora yanked up a weed with unnecessary force. Mama deserves to be sad about. They finished the garden as the sun started its descent. Evelyn's back screamed in protest when she stood, and her hands were raw from pulling weeds. But the garden looked better, not good, but better, like someone had tried. Inside, she punched down the bread dough and shaped it into loaves. The oven, a massive iron beast, took some figuring out, but eventually she got the temperature right. While the bread baked, she started on supper, beans that had been soaking since morning, salt pork, the last tired vegetables from the garden. Caleb came in at 6 exactly, Eli trailing behind him like a shadow. They washed up at the basin, and Evelyn watched the careful way Caleb handled his son, not quite touching him, but staying close, like proximity could substitute for words. They sat at the table in assigned seats that nobody had to explain. Caleb at the head, Eli to his right, Nora to his left. Evelyn took the remaining chair, feeling like an intruder despite being invited. Smells good, Caleb said. Thank you. He served himself, then the children, moving with the efficiency of someone used to doing it alone. The beans were passable. The pork was tough. But the bread, when Caleb cut into it, was perfect. Golden crust, soft interior, still warm from the oven. Nora took a bite and her eyes went wide. It's good. It's really good. It's as good as... She stopped, glancing at her father. As good as Mama's, Caleb finished quietly. It's all right, Nora. You can say it. But the moment was broken. They ate in silence after that, broken only by the scrape of forks and the sound of Nora's swinging legs bumping the table. Evelyn was washing dishes when Eli appeared at her elbow. She jumped. She hadn't heard him approach. The boy held out a drawing, carefully rendered in pencil on a scrap of paper. A woman standing in a kitchen, her back to the viewer, making bread. Is this me? Evelyn asked. Eli nodded. It's very good. Do you draw often? Another nod. May I keep it? He hesitated, then nodded a third time. But he didn't leave, just stood there watching her with those serious eyes. Do you want to help? She asked. You could dry the dishes. He picked up the towel without a word and started drying. His movements were careful, precise, like he was performing surgery rather than drying plates. When they finished, he handed back the towel, gave her one last long look, and disappeared into the bedroom he shared with Nora. He likes you. Evelyn turned to find Caleb in the doorway. How can you tell? He let you see his drawing. He doesn't show those to anyone, not even me. Caleb moved into the kitchen, restless energy in every line of his body. The pastor will come Thursday. Afternoon, probably. We'll do the ceremony then. So soon. Is there a reason to wait? Yes, Evelyn wanted to say. About 1,000 reasons. But what she said was, no, Thursday is fine. It won't be anything elaborate. Just the legal words, the signatures. He'll file the papers in town. Caleb ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. You should know that people will talk about how fast this is, about you being the mail-order bride nobody wanted. I'm aware. It'll be worse than that, though. They'll say I'm disrespecting Anna's memory, that I'm replacing her before she's cold in the ground, that I'm thinking with my... He stopped. They'll be cruel about it. Let them talk. That easy for you? No, but I've survived worse than gossip. She hung up the dish towel. Mr. Ward, Caleb, I know what this is. You've been clear from the start. This is practical, not romantic. An arrangement, not a marriage. I'm here to help with the children and the household, and you're providing shelter and stability. We both know what we're getting. Do we? He studied her face. Because I'm not sure I know anything anymore. Anna died, and it was like someone blew out a candle. Everything went dark. The kids stopped being kids. The ranch started falling apart. I started falling apart. And now here you are, a stranger in my kitchen, making bread and washing dishes. And I don't know if this is the smartest thing I've ever done, or the most selfish. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. Maybe it's both, she said. Maybe most decisions are. Maybe. He moved toward the door, then paused. Anna's things. You'll find them in the trunk at the foot of the bed, when you're ready. After he left, Evelyn stood in the kitchen, listening to the house settle into night. Nora's voice from the bedroom, talking to Eli about something. The creak of floorboards as Caleb walked to his room. The distant sound of wind moving through the prairie grass. She was going to marry a widower who didn't love her, raise children who weren't hers, live in a house that belonged to a dead woman's memory. And somehow, impossibly, she'd made peace with it. The next 3 days passed in a rhythm that felt almost normal. Wake at dawn, start the fire, make breakfast, work until dark. The list of tasks seemed endless. Laundry that hadn't been done properly in months, mending that had piled up, meals that required planning and forethought. Evelyn fell into bed each night too exhausted to think. Caleb worked from sunup to sundown, fixing everything that had broken during his year of grief. The barn door that hung crooked, the fence posts that were rotting, the chicken coop that was falling apart. He moved through his tasks with single-minded focus, speaking only when necessary. But she noticed things. The way he always checked on the children before starting work. How he left wildflowers on Anna's grave, a simple cross near the creek, barely visible unless you knew to look. The careful way he avoided the kitchen when Evelyn was cooking, like he couldn't bear to see someone else in Anna's space. On Wednesday evening, she finally tackled Anna's trunk. The children were outside, Nora chattering at Eli while he drew in the dirt. Caleb was in the barn. The house was empty. Evelyn knelt beside the trunk and lifted the lid. The smell hit her first, lavender and something else something personal. A woman's scent, preserved in cloth. She steeled herself and began removing items. Dresses, carefully folded. A shawl, hand-knitted. Undergarments, mended and remended. A hairbrush with strands still caught in the bristles. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was a wedding dress. Simple white cotton, yellowed slightly with age, with buttons down the back and lace at the collar. Evelyn lifted it carefully, and something fell out. A letter, addressed in a masculine hand. She shouldn't read it. She knew she shouldn't. She read it anyway. My dearest Anna, tomorrow you become my wife, and I find myself unable to sleep for the joy of it. You have made Ward Creek feel like home instead of duty. You have made me believe in futures instead of just surviving days. Whatever comes, whatever hardships we face, I will face them gladly, knowing you are beside me. Forever yours, Caleb. Evelyn's hands trembled. She folded the letter, placed it back in the wedding dress, wrapped everything carefully. This wasn't hers to touch. Wasn't hers to know. She packed the trunk methodically, making sure everything was secure, then carried it to the small storage room off the kitchen. Out of sight, but not discarded. Preserved, for whenever the children might want it. When Caleb came in that evening, she simply said, "It's done." He nodded once, his face unreadable. "Thank you." Thursday arrived cold and gray, clouds pressing down like the sky was too tired to hold itself up. Pastor Williams arrived at 2 in the afternoon, a small man in his 60s with kind eyes and a Bible that looked older than he was. "Caleb," he said, shaking the rancher's hand. "Miss Mercer, shall we proceed?" There was no ceremony, no flowers, no music, no witnesses beyond the pastor and the children. They stood in the main room, and Pastor Williams read from his Bible in a voice that suggested he'd done this too many times to be moved by it. "Do you, Caleb Ward, take this woman?" "I do." "Do you, Evelyn Mercer, take this man?" Evelyn looked at Caleb, at his weathered face and tired eyes, at the man who'd offered her survival when she'd needed it most. "I do." "Then by the authority vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may... Well, I suppose that's up to you." No kiss, no embrace. Caleb simply extended his hand, and Evelyn shook it like they'd just concluded a business transaction, which, she supposed, they had. Pastor Williams had them sign the register, his pen scratching across the page. "I'll file this in town tomorrow. You're legally married as of this moment. Congratulations." After he left, they stood awkwardly in the main room. Nora watched them with wide eyes. Eli had retreated to the corner, drawing. "Well," Caleb said, "that's done." "Yes." "I should get back to work. Fence won't fix itself." He left, and Evelyn was alone with the children. Nora approached slowly, like Evelyn might suddenly transform into something else. "Are you our mama now?" Evelyn knelt to the girl's level. "I'm your papa's wife. I'm here to help take care of you. But your mama, your real mama, she'll always be your mama. Nothing changes that." "But you're going to stay?" "I'm going to stay." Nora threw her arms around Evelyn's neck, squeezing hard. "Good. I'm glad you're staying." That night, Evelyn lay in her small room, listening to the house breathe around her. Married. She was married. To a man she barely knew, in a place she barely understood, playing a role she'd never auditioned for. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, she dreamed of Philadelphia, of her father's store, of a life that seemed impossibly distant now. She woke before dawn, disoriented, until she remembered where she was. Mrs. Evelyn Ward. The name felt like someone else's. The following weeks fell into a pattern that was almost comfortable. Evelyn ran the household with increasing efficiency, learning the rhythms of ranch life. When to start the bread, how to preserve the vegetables they'd managed to save from the dying garden, which chickens were reliable layers and which were just eating feed without contributing. The children slowly, tentatively, began to trust her. Nora stopped asking if Evelyn was going to leave and started asking other questions instead. What was Philadelphia like? Had Evelyn ever seen the ocean? Did she know any stories? Eli remained silent, but he started showing her more drawings. Horses. The barn. His sister laughing. Small windows into his locked-down world. Caleb remained distant, but not unkind. They developed a working relationship, practical, efficient, mostly wordless. He'd point out things that needed doing. She'd do them. They'd eat meals together without much conversation. At night, he'd retreat to his room, and she'd retreat to hers, and the space between them stayed carefully maintained. It was working, sort of. Then the fever came. It started with Nora looking tired at breakfast. Nothing alarming, just a little pale. By lunch, she was flushed. By dinner, she was burning. "Papa," she whispered, her voice thin. "I don't feel good." Caleb's face went white. He pressed his hand to her forehead and flinched at the heat. "Eli, get fresh water. Evelyn, we need cold cloths. Now." The fear in his voice was absolute. They carried Nora to her bed, and Evelyn started stripping off the girl's outer clothes while Caleb hovered uselessly nearby. Nora's skin was fire-hot, her eyes glassy. "It's the fever," Caleb said, his voice hollow. "The summer fever. It's what killed—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Evelyn soaked cloths in cold water and laid them across Nora's forehead, her chest, her arms. The girl whimpered but didn't fight. "How long?" Evelyn asked. "What? How long did your wife have the fever before?" 3 days. She was fine in the morning, dead by the end of the 3rd day. Evelyn's hands moved automatically, changing the cloths, checking Nora's pulse. The girl's breathing was shallow, rapid. Her fever was climbing. "Caleb," she said quietly, "I need you to listen to me. Can you do that?" He nodded, looking lost. "Go into town. Get the doctor. I don't care what it costs or if he wants to come. Get him here. Take Eli with you. He shouldn't see this if it gets worse." "I can't leave." "You have to. I'll stay with Nora. I won't leave her side, but she needs medicine, and you need to not be here remembering." She met his eyes. "Trust me. Please." After a long moment, he nodded. "I'll be back before dawn." He left, taking Eli, and Evelyn was alone with the sick child. The night that followed was endless. Nora drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes delirious. Evelyn changed the cold compresses every few minutes, forced small sips of water between the girl's cracked lips, whispered nonsense words when Nora cried out. "Mama," Nora whimpered at one point. "Mama, it hurts." "I know, sweetheart. I know." "Are you Mama?" Evelyn's throat tightened. "No, I'm Evelyn." "Oh." Nora's eyes drifted closed. "That's all right. You're nice too." Near midnight, the fever spiked higher. Nora started convulsing, her small body shaking violently. Evelyn held her, keeping her from hurting herself, murmuring words that had no meaning beyond their sound. This was what Caleb had seen. This was what had taken Anna. But Evelyn refused to let it take Nora. She worked through the night, changing compresses, monitoring breathing, doing everything her mother had taught her during the cholera outbreak in Philadelphia. Keep them cool. Keep them hydrated. Keep them breathing. Just before dawn, something shifted. Nora's breathing evened out. The convulsions stopped. And when Evelyn checked her forehead, the fever had broken. The girl slept peacefully, naturally, her face pale but no longer burning. Evelyn slumped against the wall, exhausted beyond measure, and let herself cry. That's how Caleb found her when he returned with the doctor, sitting on the floor beside Nora's bed, tears streaming down her face, the girl sleeping peacefully nearby. "She's alive," Evelyn managed. "The fever broke." Caleb's knees gave out. He simply sat down where he was, staring at his daughter, his face crumpling in a way that suggested he was feeling things he'd locked away for a year. The doctor examined Nora, declared her out of danger, left some medicine and instructions. But Evelyn barely heard him. She was watching Caleb, watching him remember how to hope, watching something inside him crack and reshape. When the doctor left, Caleb finally looked at her. "You saved her." "I just did what needed doing." "No." His voice was rough. "Anna died because I didn't know what to do. I panicked. He stopped, struggling. "You saved her. And I will never be able to thank you enough for that." Evelyn had no response. She was too tired, too wrung out. She just nodded and let her eyes close. When she woke later, someone had carried her to her own bed and covered her with a blanket. Through the wall, she could hear Nora's voice, weak but present, asking for water, asking for bread, asking for Evelyn. She got up, steadied herself, and went to see what the girl needed, because that's what she did now. That's who she'd become. And somewhere in the long, terrifying night, she'd stopped being an outsider and become something else entirely. Nora's recovery was slow and marked by small victories that felt enormous. The first time she sat up on her own. The first real meal she kept down. The first smile that wasn't forced or feverish but genuine. Evelyn stayed close for the first week, sleeping on the floor beside Nora's bed despite the girl's protests that she was fine now. Really, truly fine. But Evelyn had seen how quickly things could turn, how a body could betray you when you least expected it, and she wasn't taking chances. Caleb changed after that night. Not dramatically. He was still quiet, still kept his distance, but something fundamental had shifted. He looked at Evelyn differently now. Not with the careful neutrality of a business arrangement, but with something closer to recognition. Like he'd finally seen her as a person instead of a solution to a problem. "You should rest," he said one morning, finding her red-eyed at the breakfast table. "I can handle things today." "I'm fine. You're exhausted. When's the last time you slept more than 3 hours?" She couldn't remember. The days had blurred together since Nora's fever broke, a constant cycle of monitoring, caring, worrying. "Someone needs to watch her." "I'll watch her. You need to sleep before you collapse." His tone left no room for argument. "That's not a request." So Evelyn slept, falling into her bed fully clothed and not waking until late afternoon. When she emerged, groggy and disoriented, she found Caleb in the kitchen making dinner, or attempting to. The beans were burning, and smoke rose from something on the stove. "Let me sit down." He didn't look up from the pot he was stirring. "You're supposed to be resting." "Caleb, you're burning the "I know I'm burning it. I'm aware." He grabbed the pot off the heat, frustrated. Anna used to make this look easy. The name hung between them. He rarely said it out loud, and when he did, his voice always caught on the syllables. Evelyn moved to the stove, gently taking the spoon from his hand. "Let me fix it. You can rest too." "I don't need rest. I need to figure out how to cook a simple meal without destroying it." "Why? That's what I'm here for." He turned to face her, and something in his expression made her stop. "Because if something happens to you, we're back where we started, helpless. I don't want to be helpless again." The honesty in his voice cut through her fatigue. She understood then. This wasn't about the beans. It was about control. About not being the man who'd watched his wife die without knowing how to stop it. "Then let me teach you," she said quietly. "Not today, but soon. I'll teach you everything I know about keeping a household running. That way you're not helpless. You're prepared." He studied her face for a long moment. "You'd do that?" "We're married, Caleb. For better or worse, remember? Even if those words were just legal formality to you, they mean something to me. I'm not going to leave you unprepared if I can help it." Something flickered across his face. Gratitude, maybe, or surprise. "Thank you." They salvaged dinner together, working in silence that felt almost comfortable. When they sat down to eat with the children, Nora complained that the beans tasted funny, and Eli pushed his around his plate, but nobody went hungry. That felt like victory enough. The next morning, Evelyn woke to find Eli standing beside her bed, holding a drawing. She sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "What's this?" He held it out. The drawing showed a woman leaning over a bed, changing a cloth on a sick girl's forehead. The detail was remarkable for a 7-year-old. The exhaustion in the woman's posture, the fever flush on the girl's face, the cluttered medicine bottles on the nightstand. "This is from that night," Evelyn said. "You were with your papa in town. How did you—" Eli reached into his pocket and pulled out another drawing. Same scene, but this time it showed Caleb sitting against the wall, face in his hands, while the doctor examined Nora. A third drawing showed Evelyn slumped on the floor, crying. "Your papa told you what happened." The boy nodded. "And you drew it." Another nod. Evelyn looked at the drawings again, seeing them differently now. This was how Eli processed things, through his art, through capturing moments in pencil and paper when words failed him. "These are beautiful, Eli, and very accurate." She met his eyes. "Can I ask you something? Do you draw your mama?" His face shuddered immediately. He stepped back, reaching for the drawings like he wanted to take them back. "It's all right," Evelyn said quickly. "You don't have to answer. I was just curious." But Eli surprised her. He reached into his pocket again and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft from handling. He unfolded it carefully and held it out. The drawing showed a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, standing in the kitchen with flour on her hands. Behind her, 2 small children played on the floor. The whole scene radiated warmth in a way his other drawings didn't. "She's beautiful," Evelyn whispered. "You captured something real there, something important." Eli's eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall. He grabbed all the drawings, stuffed them back in his pocket, and ran from the room. Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed, heart aching for the boy who'd lost his voice along with his mother and didn't know how to find either one again. That afternoon, while Nora napped and Caleb worked on the south fence, Evelyn found Eli in the barn, drawing in the hayloft. She climbed up slowly, giving him time to hide his work if he wanted to, but he just watched her approach with wary eyes. "Can I sit with you?" He shrugged, which she took as permission. They sat in silence for a while, Eli's pencil scratching across paper while Evelyn watched dust motes dance in the sunlight streaming through the loft door. "Your drawings are really good," she finally said. "Has anyone ever told you that?" Eli shook his head. "Well, they are. You have a gift for capturing moments, for showing what people are feeling, not just what they look like." She paused. "Do you know what I think?" He looked up, waiting. "I think you're talking, just not with words. You're telling stories through your art, and that's just as valid as speaking." Eli's pencil stilled. He stared at her like she'd said something impossible. "I'm not saying you shouldn't use your voice if you want to. I'm just saying that silence doesn't mean you have nothing to say. It just means you found a different language." She smiled gently. "And for what it's worth, I'm learning to understand it." The boy's chin trembled. Then, in a voice so quiet she almost missed it, he whispered, "She can't hear me anyway." Evelyn's breath caught. First word she'd heard him speak. "Your mama. I tried, after she went away. I tried talking to her, but she didn't answer, so I stopped." His voice was rusty, like machinery that hadn't been used in too long. "Papa says she's in heaven, but I don't know where that is. How can she hear me if I don't know where she is?" Tears burned Evelyn's eyes. She wanted to offer comfort, to say something profound that would ease his pain, but she'd learned that children didn't need profound. They needed honest. "I don't know if she can hear you, Eli. I wish I could tell you for certain, but I can't. What I do know is that she loved you very much when she was here, and that doesn't stop just because someone goes away." "How do you know?" "Because my papa died too. And I still feel his love, even though he's been gone for 2 years. It's different than when he was alive, quieter, harder to touch, but it's still there." She reached over and gently touched his drawing. "Maybe that's what you're doing with these, keeping her love alive by remembering her, by showing the world who she was." Eli's tears finally fell, silent streams down his cheeks. "I'm scared I'll forget." "Then keep drawing. Draw everything you remember. Draw her smile, her hands, the way she looked when she made breakfast. Draw until the memories are so solid on paper that they can't disappear." "Will you help me?" "Help you how?" "Tell me about your papa, how you remember him, so I know I'm doing it right." Evelyn's throat tightened. She hadn't talked about her father in months, hadn't let herself think about him because thinking led to missing, and missing led to an ache that had no cure. But this wasn't about her. This was about a little boy trying to hold on to his mother in the only way he knew how. "My papa," she began slowly, "had this laugh that filled up a whole room. Big and booming, impossible to ignore. And he sang when he worked, terrible off-key songs that made my mama shake her head. But he didn't care. He said life was too short to be quiet." Eli listened with absolute focus, his pencil moving across the paper. When Evelyn finished talking, he turned the drawing around. Somehow, impossibly, he'd captured her father. Not his face, because Eli had never seen him, but his essence. A man with arms spread wide, head thrown back, joy radiating from every line. "That's him," Evelyn whispered. "That's exactly him." Eli smiled. A small, tentative thing, but real. "Thank you," he said, his voice still quiet but present. "For what?" "For not being scared of sad things." Evelyn pulled him into a hug, and after a moment he hugged her back. They sat like that in the hayloft, 2 people bound by loss and trying to figure out how to keep living anyway,
while the afternoon sun slanted through the barn and the world kept turning despite their grief.
That evening at dinner, Eli spoke. Not much, just please and thank you and may I be excused. But enough that Nora dropped her fork in shock and Caleb froze with his cup halfway to his mouth. Eli? Nora breathed. You're talking. The boy shrugged, but there was something different in his posture. Less burdened, maybe. Less alone. Caleb looked across the table at Evelyn, questions in his eyes that he didn't voice. She gave him a small smile and went back to her meal, letting the moment be what it was without explanation. Later, after the children were in bed, Caleb found her on the porch, watching the stars emerge. What did you say to him? Nothing magical, just honest things. He hasn't spoken in a year. Caleb's voice was rough. I tried everything, pleading, demanding, bribing. Nothing worked. Then you spend one afternoon with him, and suddenly he's talking again. It wasn't magic, Caleb. It was timing. He was ready. Or you gave him permission to be ready. He leaned against the porch rail, studying her face in the dim light. You're good with them, better than I am. That's not true. It is, though. I love them, but I don't know how to reach them anymore. Every time I try, I see Anna instead, and I freeze up. But you just step in and know exactly what they need. I don't know anything. I'm making it up as I go. Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself against the evening chill. But maybe that's the point. They don't need perfect. They just need present. Is that what you're doing? Just being present? I'm trying to be what they need, what you need, even if I don't always know what that is. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then, I need to apologize. For what? For bringing you here under false pretenses. I told you this was practical, that it was just an arrangement, but that was a lie. Or at least, it was a partial truth. He turned to face her fully. I needed help, yes. But more than that, I needed someone to pull me out of the hole I'd been living in. Someone to remind me that life doesn't stop just because you want it to. And I used you for that without being honest about what I was asking. Caleb, let me finish. His jaw worked. You saved Nora's life. You brought my son back from wherever he'd been hiding. You've held this family together when I was barely holding myself together. And I've given you nothing in return except a roof and my name. That's not fair. That's not what you deserve. What do I deserve? The question seemed to catch him off guard. I don't know. More than this. More than me. Evelyn stepped closer, closing the distance between them. Let me tell you something about what I deserve. I deserve not to starve on the streets of Dry Hollow because 3 men found me lacking. I deserve a place where my work has meaning instead of just being another mouth to feed. I deserve to wake up every morning and know I'm building something instead of just surviving. She met his eyes. You've given me all of that. Maybe it's not romantic. Maybe it's not what fairy tales promise. But it's real, and it's mine. And I'm not going to apologize for being grateful. You shouldn't have to be grateful for basic decency. Maybe not, but I am anyway. She smiled slightly. We're both doing the best we can with what we have. That's enough for now. It has to be. Caleb reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His hand was rough, calloused, but gentle. You're remarkable, he said quietly. I don't think I've told you that. You don't have to eat. Yes, I do. Because it's true and you should hear it. His hand lingered near her face. Anna would have liked you. She would have appreciated how you care for the children, how you don't try to erase her memory, but make room beside it. The mention of Anna should have created distance, but somehow it didn't. Instead, it felt like an invitation. Permission to exist in the same space as the wife he'd loved, the mother his children still mourned. I wish I could have known her, Evelyn said honestly. She was better than me, kinder, more patient, quicker to laugh. I was always the serious one, always worrying about the ranch, about money, about the future. She balanced me out. His voice went rough. Without her, I'm just unbalanced. That's grief talking. You're not unbalanced. You're learning to stand on your own, and that's hard, but you're doing it. With your help. We're helping each other. That's how this works. She stepped back, needing space before the moment became something she didn't know how to handle. I should check on Nora one more time before bed. Evelyn? He caught her hand. Thank you. For everything. She squeezed his fingers briefly, then slipped away into the house, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. The weeks that followed brought changes too subtle to name, but impossible to miss. Caleb started joining her in the kitchen in the evenings, ostensibly to learn cooking, but really just to talk. Nora grew stronger, her laughter returning in bursts that filled the house with sound. Eli spoke more often, his words still sparse but present, and he started showing his drawings to everyone instead of hiding them. The ranch itself began to reflect the shift. The garden, properly tended, produced a late crop of vegetables that Evelyn preserved for winter. The chicken coop got repaired, and egg production increased. Small improvements, none of them dramatic, but collectively they added up to something that felt almost like thriving. One afternoon in early October, Evelyn was hanging laundry when she heard a wagon approaching. Visitors were rare this far out, and her stomach clenched with automatic anxiety. The wagon pulled up, and Robert Dalton climbed down, looking uncomfortable in clothes too fine for ranch visiting. "Mrs. Ward," he said, removing his hat, "I hope I'm not intruding." Evelyn set down the laundry basket slowly. "Mr. Dalton, this is unexpected." "I imagine so." He twisted the hat in his hands. "Is your husband home?" "He's working the north pasture. Can I help you with something?" "Actually, I came to speak with you, if you have a moment." She didn't want to give him a moment, didn't want to hear whatever he'd come to say. But refusing would be rude, and she'd learned that ranch life meant maintaining civility even with people you'd rather never see again. "Of course. Would you like to come inside?" No, this won't take long." He glanced around the property, taking in the mended fence, the tidy garden, the general air of being cared for. "The place looks good. Caleb's lucky to have found you." "Is there a point to this visit, Mr. Dalton?" He flinched at her directness. "Yes. I came to apologize. What I did, rejecting you like that, publicly, with Martha standing right there, it was cruel. I felt badly about it ever since." "Have you?" "I have, truly. And I wanted you to know that Martha and I, well, we're not engaged anymore. Turns out her father's land came with expectations I wasn't willing to meet, and she wasn't willing to marry without them." Evelyn waited, wondering if he actually expected her to feel sympathy. "I've been thinking," Robert continued, "that perhaps I made a mistake. That perhaps if you and I were to—" "No. You haven't let me finish." "I don't need to. The answer is no." She picked up the laundry basket, needing something to do with her hands. "I'm married, Mr. Dalton, happily so. Whatever you came here hoping for, you won't find it." "Happily?" His tone turned skeptical. "You married a widower with 2 children and a failing ranch. Everyone in town knows it was desperation, not happiness. Everyone in town doesn't know anything about my marriage, and frankly, it's none of their concern. Or yours. I'm trying to offer you a way out, a chance at something better." The laugh that escaped her was sharp and genuine. "Better? You think you're offering me better? You rejected me in front of the entire town because I wasn't convenient enough. Caleb married me because he saw something worth fighting for, even in my worst moment. Those aren't the same thing, Mr. Dalton, not even close. Caleb married you because he needed free labor and someone to mother his children. Don't pretend it was anything more romantic than that." "You're right. It wasn't romantic. It was honest. He told me exactly what he needed and what he could offer in return. No false promises. No sudden changes of heart when someone better came along. Just truth." She met his eyes steadily. "I'll take honest need over romantic pretense any day." Robert's face reddened. "You're making a mistake." "No. I made a mistake when I believed your letters, when I thought pretty words from a stranger meant something real. But I corrected that mistake, and I'm not going back. You'll regret this. The only thing I regret is wasting money traveling here to meet you, but even that worked out because it brought me somewhere better." She gestured to the house, the ranch, the life she was building. "This is mine now. Not perfect, not easy, but mine. And you're not welcome here anymore." Robert stared at her for a long moment, then jammed his hat back on his head and climbed into his wagon without another word. She watched him drive away, dust rising behind his wheels, and felt nothing but relief. When she turned back to the house, Caleb was standing on the porch. "How long have you been there?" "Long enough." He came down the steps, moving slowly. You didn't have to defend me like that. I wasn't defending you. I was defending us. There's a difference. Is there? He stopped in front of her close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. Because it sounded like you were telling him our marriage is more than just a practical arrangement. Isn't it? The question came out before she could stop it. Caleb, we've been living together for 2 months. We eat meals together. We raise children together. We fix fences and preserve vegetables and argue about whether the chickens need more feed. That's not an arrangement. That's a life. A life you signed up for out of desperation. I signed up for it out of necessity. I'm staying because I choose to. Those aren't the same thing either. Something shifted in his expression. You're choosing to stay. Every day. Even on the hard days when Nora won't stop talking and Eli won't start, when the bread doesn't rise and the chickens escape and everything feels impossible. I still choose this. She set down the laundry basket. Do you want me to leave? No. The word came out fierce. No, I don't want you to leave. I don't know what I want exactly, but I know it's not that. Then what do you want? He stepped closer and she could feel the heat of him, the solid reality of him. I want to stop feeling guilty for being glad you're here. I want to wake up in the morning and not wonder if you're going to realize you deserve better and disappear. I want... He stopped, struggling. I want things I have no right to want. Not this soon. Not when Anna's only been gone a year. Caleb. Evelyn reached up and touched his face, feeling the roughness of his jaw. Anna was your wife, the mother of your children. Nothing changes that. But she's not here anymore, and we are. And I think she'd want you to keep living. Not forget her. Just keep living. How do you know what she'd want? Because I know what I'd want if I were her. I'd want the man I loved to find happiness again, even if that happiness looked different than what we'd built together. Caleb's hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his face. You're making this complicated. Life is complicated. We're just figuring it out as we go. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he kissed her, gentle, tentative, like he was asking a question he didn't know how to voice. Evelyn kissed him back, and it wasn't fireworks or destiny or any of the things the romantic novels promised. It was just real. Just two people trying to find solid ground in the middle of messy, complicated life. When they pulled apart, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. I don't know what I'm doing. Neither do I, but we'll figure it out. Together? Together. A sound from the house made them step apart. Nora stood in the doorway, grinning like she'd won something. Were you kissing? She demanded. Nora? You were. Saw it. Does this mean Evelyn's really our mama now? Caleb looked at Evelyn, helpless. It means, Evelyn said carefully, that your papa and I are figuring things out. And we'll tell you about it when we know what it means ourselves. Fair? Nora considered this. I guess, but I hope it means you're staying forever, because I really like you. I like you too, sweetheart. The girl beamed and ran back inside, probably to tell Eli everything she'd witnessed. Caleb groaned. The whole town will know by tomorrow. Let them know. I don't care anymore. Evelyn picked up the laundry basket. Besides, we're married. We're allowed to kiss our own spouses. Is that what we are? Spouses who kiss? I don't know. What do you want to be? He took the basket from her hands and set it down again, then pulled her close. I want to be whatever this is, whatever we're building, even if I don't have words for it yet. That works for me. They stood there on the dusty ranch yard, holding each other while the autumn wind whispered through the prairie grass and the sun started its descent toward the horizon. Inside the house, the children argued about something trivial. The chickens clucked in their coop. The world kept turning, indifferent to small human moments. But this moment mattered anyway, because it was theirs, built from honest need and careful trust, and the slow, stubborn work of becoming something more than the sum of their broken parts. And for the first time since arriving at Ward Creek Ranch, Evelyn let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd found something worth keeping. Winter came early that year, arriving in November with snow that turned the prairie into something unrecognizable. Evelyn woke one morning to find the world transformed, white and silent and vast in a way that made her feel both insignificant and strangely protected. First snow, Caleb said from the kitchen when she emerged, already dressed for the day. We'll need to bring the livestock closer to the barn. Check the hay stores. Make sure everything's secured before the real cold hits. This isn't the real cold? He smiled slightly. This is nothing. Wait until January. The thought should have terrified her, but instead she felt a strange anticipation. She'd survived summer heat and autumn storms and a child's near death. Winter would just be one more thing to get through. They worked together that morning, moving animals, stacking firewood, checking supplies. The children stayed inside, Nora pressed against the window watching the snow, while Eli drew scene after scene of the white-covered landscape. By afternoon, the ranch was as prepared as it could be, and Evelyn's hands were numb despite her gloves. "Come here," Caleb said when they finally retreated to the house. He took her hands in his and rubbed them gently, bringing feeling back with friction and warmth. "You need better gloves. I'll get some in town next week." "These are fine." "They're not. Your fingers are ice." He kept rubbing, his hands large and rough around hers. "We can't have you losing fingers to frostbite. Practical as always." "Someone has to be." But there was warmth in his voice that hadn't been there months ago, something that sounded almost like affection. Things had shifted between them since Robert Dalton's visit, though neither of them had defined exactly how. They still slept in separate rooms, Evelyn in her small space, Caleb in the bedroom he'd shared with Anna. But the distance felt different now, more like respect for boundaries than emotional walls. They touched more. Small things. His hand on her back when he passed behind her, her fingers brushing his when she handed him coffee. Moments of contact that lasted just long enough to mean something without demanding explanation. The children noticed. Nora, predictably, commented constantly. "Are you going to have a baby?" she asked one morning at breakfast. Evelyn choked on her coffee. "What? A baby? Mrs. Henderson in town says married people have babies. Are you and Papa going to have one?" "Nora," Caleb said sharply, "that's not appropriate conversation." "Why not? I want a little brother or sister. Eli does too. Don't you, Eli?" Eli, focused on his eggs, shrugged in a way that could have meant anything. "Well, I do. I think a baby would be nice. We could name it Nora." Evelyn's voice was gentle but firm. "That's enough. Eat your breakfast." The girl subsided, but not before shooting them both a look that suggested this conversation was merely postponed, not abandoned. After the children went outside to play in the snow, Caleb said quietly, "I'm sorry about that. She's 7. 7-year-olds ask questions. Still, it must be uncomfortable." Evelyn rinsed her cup in the basin, not looking at him. "Is it so impossible to imagine? A baby?" The silence that followed stretched too long. "I don't know," Caleb finally said. "Anna and I, after the twins, she had trouble. The doctor said another pregnancy would be dangerous. We accepted that. Learned to be content with 2. He paused. "I haven't let myself think about it since." "But if you did think about it." "I don't know," he repeated. "Everything's still so new between us. I don't want to assume things we haven't talked about." "Then let's talk about them." He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw uncertainty in his face. "What do you want, Evelyn? From this marriage, from this life? What do you actually want?" It was the first time he'd asked her directly, the first time he'd acknowledged that she might want something beyond survival. "I want what we're building," she said slowly. "I want to wake up and know I'm needed. I want to watch Nora grow into whoever she's going to be and help Eli find his voice. I want to preserve vegetables and mend clothes and fix fences and feel like all of it matters because it's ours." She met his eyes. "And yes, someday, maybe I want a baby, not to replace what you had with Anna, just to add to what we're making now." "That's a lot of wants." "You asked." "I did." He crossed the kitchen, closing the distance between them. "For what it's worth, I want those things too. Not the baby, not yet. That's too much to think about right now. But the rest of it, building something that matters, making this feel like more than just survival." "It already is more than survival, Caleb." "Is it?" His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "Sometimes I think we're still just 2 people running from our pasts, trying to convince ourselves we've found something real. Maybe that's what real is. Two people running in the same direction who decide to stop running and build something instead. He kissed her then, deeper than the tentative kiss in the yard, and Evelyn felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't gratitude or practicality or making the best of a bad situation. This was choice. This was want. When they pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to mess this up. You know that, right? I'm going to say the wrong thing or do something stupid or freeze up when I shouldn't. I know. I'll mess it up too. I'll push too hard or not hard enough or completely misread what you need. So we'll both be terrible at this. Probably, she smiled, but we'll be terrible together. The sound of the door banging open sent them springing apart like guilty teenagers. Nora burst in, covered in snow, Eli trailing behind looking equally frosted. It's snowing harder, Nora announced unnecessarily. Can we build a snow fort? Papa, will you help? Caleb glanced at Evelyn and she saw the apology in his eyes. Duty calling, moment interrupted. Go, she said. Build your fort. I'll start on lunch. He squeezed her hand briefly before letting Nora drag him back outside. Through the window, Evelyn watched them work together, Caleb showing the children how to pack snow properly, Nora chattering constantly while Eli worked in focused silence. They looked like a family. Not perfect, not without their scars, but real and present and trying. The afternoon passed quickly. Evelyn made stew, thick and warming, and fresh bread that filled the house with the smell of yeast and comfort. By the time Caleb and the children came back inside, red-cheeked and snow-covered, the table was set and the food was ready. That smells amazing, Caleb said, stripping off his wet coat. I'm freezing. Then eat, all of you, before it gets cold. They crowded around the table, and Evelyn felt a surge of something she couldn't quite name. This was hers. This chaotic, imperfect, hard-won life was actually hers. After dinner, while Caleb helped the children with their baths, Evelyn sat at the table with paper and pen. She'd been thinking about this for weeks, turning it over in her mind, and tonight felt like the right time to act. She began to write. Dear Miss. She paused, considering. She didn't know who would read this, didn't know if anyone would read it, but she kept writing anyway. If you're reading this, you're probably where I was 6 months ago, desperate, displaced, wondering if you made a terrible mistake coming west. You're probably standing in some dusty town, watching men look through you instead of at you, feeling like merchandise that didn't make the grade. I'm writing to tell you that you're not alone. And more importantly, to tell you some truths I wish someone had told me. The letters lie. Not always, not completely, but they lie. Men will promise you comfort and security and romance, and what they actually mean is they need someone to cook and clean and raise their children. That's not necessarily bad. Work is work, and we all need to survive. But you should know the truth before you step off that stage. Some men are kind. Some are cruel. Most are somewhere in between. Your job, if you choose to come west, is to figure out which is which before you're legally bound to someone who will make your life hell. Ask questions. Demand honesty. If a man won't tell you exactly what he's offering and exactly what he expects, walk away. Desperation is not a good enough reason to marry someone who won't respect you. And if you find yourself rejected, humiliated, standing in the street with nowhere to go, know that it's not the end. I thought it was. I thought being unwanted meant I had no value. But I was wrong. Sometimes rejection saves you from something worse. Sometimes it pushes you towards something better. I can't promise you'll find happiness out here. I can't promise anything will work out the way you hope. What I can promise is that you're stronger than you think, braver than you know, and capable of building something real even when everything feels impossible. Trust yourself. Trust your instincts. And if someone offers you an honest deal instead of a romantic fantasy, consider it carefully. Sometimes the best marriages are the ones that start with truth instead of pretty lies. Yours in understanding, Mrs. Evelyn Ward. Ward Creek Ranch, Dry Hollow. She read it over twice, making small corrections, then folded it carefully. She didn't know what she'd do with it yet. Maybe send it to the newspaper in Denver that ran matrimonial advertisements. Maybe just keep it as a record of how far she'd come. What are you writing? She looked up to find Caleb in the doorway, hair damp from supervising baths. A letter. To women like me.
The ones who answer marriage advertisements and come west hoping for better lives. He moved closer, reading over her shoulder. You're telling them the truth. Someone should. The advertisements don't. No, they don't. He pulled out a chair and sat beside her. Are you going to send it somewhere? I don't know yet. Maybe. Or maybe I'll just write more of them. Create a whole collection of honest letters about frontier marriage. Something to balance out all the romantic nonsense. That's not a bad idea? He studied her face. You could help people. Women who need to know what they're getting into. Or scare them off completely. If they're that easily scared, they probably shouldn't come west anyway. He picked up the letter, read it more carefully. This is good, Evelyn. Honest, but not cruel. Realistic, but not hopeless. If I'd been a woman considering the West, I'd want to read this. You think so? I do. He set down the letter. Send it. See what happens. Worst case, nobody responds. Best case, you help someone avoid the mistakes you almost made. I didn't almost make mistakes. I made them. I just got lucky that they led somewhere better. That's not luck. That's you being smart enough to recognize opportunity even when it looked terrible. He covered her hand with his. You could have refused my offer, gone back east, started over somewhere else. But you stayed. You took a risk on a broken widower and his traumatized children, and you turned it into something worth having. We turned it into something, not just me, mostly you. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. I was drowning, Evelyn. After Anna died, I was barely keeping my head above water. The children were suffering, the ranch was failing, and I couldn't see a way forward. Then you showed up with your ridiculous hope and stubborn determination, and suddenly I could breathe again. I wasn't hopeful. I was desperate. Same thing sometimes. He smiled slightly. The point is, you saved us. All of us. And now you want to save other women too. That's remarkable. Evelyn felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm not remarkable. I'm just practical. You're both. He leaned over and kissed her temple, gentle and brief. Send the letter. Help someone else find their way. So she did. The next time Caleb went to town, she gave him the letter with instructions to mail it to the Denver newspaper. She didn't expect anything to come of it. Just putting honest words into the world felt like enough. 3 weeks later, she got her first response. The letter arrived with Caleb when he returned from his weekly supply run, bundled in his coat pocket alongside seed catalogs and a notice about spring cattle prices. This came for you, he said, handing it over. From Denver. Evelyn's hand shook slightly as she opened it. The handwriting was feminine, careful, the paper cheap but clean. Dear Mrs. Ward, I read your letter in the Rocky Mountain News, and I had to write. I'm standing exactly where you described, in a town called Silver Creek, rejected by the man I traveled here to marry, with $6 to my name and nowhere to go. Your words gave me hope. Not false hope, not the kind that promises everything will be fine, real hope. The kind that says, I can survive this, even if it's hard. I wanted to ask, did you really mean what you wrote? That rejection can lead somewhere better? Because right now it just feels like the end of everything. Sincerely, Miss Caroline Foster. Evelyn read it twice, her throat tight. This woman, this stranger, was living her nightmare. Standing in a dusty street, unwanted and afraid, wondering if she'd made a fatal mistake. What does it say? Caleb asked. It's from a woman in Silver Creek. She's exactly where I was. Rejected, desperate, looking for answers. Evelyn looked up at him. I have to respond. Then respond. She spent the evening crafting a reply, choosing each word carefully, not promising miracles, not offering false comfort. Just honest guidance from someone who'd walked the same path. Dear Caroline, yes, I meant every word, but I need you to understand something important. Rejection leading somewhere better doesn't happen by itself. You have to make it happen. First, assess your actual options. Do you have skills beyond housework? Can you keep books, sew, teach, cook professionally? Towns need workers, not just wives. If you can find work, you have leverage. Second, be brutally honest about any marriage offers you receive. If a man offers you security, find out exactly what that means. What work? What living conditions? What expectations? Never accept vague promises. Third, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Desperation makes us ignore warning signs, but
Those signs exist for a reason. I won't lie to you. The path I took was hard, is still hard, but it's mine, and that makes all the difference. If you want to write again, I'm here. Sometimes just knowing someone else survived it helps. Yours, Evelyn Ward. She sent it the next day, not expecting Caroline to respond. But 2 weeks later, another letter arrived. Then another. Then letters from other women. Women who'd read her initial letter and found in it something they desperately needed. By February, Evelyn was corresponding with 8 different women across 3 territories. Women who'd answered marriage advertisements and found reality harsher than promises. Women looking for honest guidance in a world that offered them pretty lies. "You're building something," Caleb said one evening, watching her sort through letters at the kitchen table. "A network, or whatever you want to call it. Women helping women." "I'm just answering letters." "You're doing more than that. You're giving them information they can't get anywhere else. Practical advice about surviving frontier marriage." He sat across from her. "Have you thought about making it more formal? Maybe collecting your letters into some kind of guide?" "Who would publish that?" "I don't know, but it's worth asking." He gestured to the pile of correspondence. "You're clearly filling a need. Women are writing to you from hundreds of miles away because nobody else is telling them the truth. That's valuable." Evelyn looked at the letters, at the desperate handwriting and honest questions, and felt something crystallize in her mind. I could do more. Not just letters. Maybe something women could reference before they even left home. Something that told them what to really expect. Then do it. It's not that simple. Why not? Because I have a ranch to help run, children to care for, a household to manage. I can't just... "You can do both," Caleb interrupted. "We'll make it work. If this is important to you, we'll figure it out." She stared at him. "Why are you being so supportive of this?" "Because you saved my family. The least I can do is support you saving others." He reached across the table and took her hand. "And because I want you to have something that's yours. Not just helping with my ranch, raising my children, living in my house. Something you built from nothing that has nothing to do with me." Winter deepened and life at Ward Creek Ranch settled into a rhythm that felt almost comfortable. Caleb and Evelyn worked side by side daily, their movements synchronized in the way of people who'd learned to anticipate each other's needs. The touches between them became more frequent, more natural. Nothing dramatic, just hands brushing while washing dishes, shoulders touching while reading by the fire, brief kisses stolen when the children weren't watching. One night in March, after a particularly long day, Evelyn sat by the fire reviewing her manuscript. The guide was nearly complete, 30 pages of honest, practical advice for women considering frontier marriage. Caleb emerged from the children's room and settled beside her on the worn sofa. "They asleep?" Finally, Nora insisted on 3 stories. She always does. He leaned back, exhausted. "What are you working on?" "Final edits. I think it's almost ready to send to publishers. Can I read it?" She hesitated, then handed over the pages. Watching him read her work felt more intimate than anything physical they'd shared. This was her thoughts, her experience, her truth laid bare in words. Caleb read slowly, his expression shifting from interested to impressed to something she couldn't quite identify. "This is good," he finally said. "Really good. You don't pull punches." "Should I?" "No. That's what makes it valuable." He flipped back to an earlier section. "This part about assessing character through letters, that's brilliant. Specific questions to ask, warning signs to watch for. Every woman coming west should read this." "You think publishers will agree?" "I think you won't know until you try." He set down the manuscript. "But Evelyn, even if nobody publishes it, this matters. You've created something important." "It's just advice." "It's more than that. It's protection. Information is armor." He pulled her against his side, and she let herself lean into his warmth. "You're going to help so many women avoid the mistakes that could destroy them." They sat in comfortable silence, fire crackling, wind howling outside. Eventually, Caleb said quietly, "I'm glad Robert Dalton rejected you." Evelyn laughed, surprised. "That's an odd thing to be glad about." "I know. But if he hadn't, you wouldn't be here. Wouldn't be mine." He caught himself. "Ours, the children's and mine." "I am yours," Evelyn said softly.
Maybe that started as a technicality, but it's not anymore. I chose this. I choose it every day. Even when it's hard? Especially when it's hard. Easy choices don't mean anything. Caleb turned to face her fully, his expression serious. I love you. The words hung in the air between them, enormous and unexpected.
Evelyn's breath caught. What?
I love you, he repeated. I probably have for a while now, but I was too scared to say it, too worried about betraying Anna's memory or rushing things or ruining what we'd built. But I'm tired of being scared. I love you, and you deserve to hear it. Tears spilled down Evelyn's cheeks before she could stop them. I love you too. I didn't think this kind of marriage could lead to love. But here we are. He kissed her then, and it was different from all the other kisses. Deeper, more certain, weighted with words that had finally been said. When they pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Caleb whispered, I don't deserve you. That's not for you to decide. She cupped his face in her hands. We deserve each other. That's enough. They stayed up late that night, talking quietly about everything and nothing. About Anna and how loving Evelyn didn't erase that first love but existed alongside it. About the future, the ranch's prospects, the children's growth, the possibility of expanding their families someday. When they finally went to bed, separately, still respecting boundaries, Evelyn lay in her small room and felt something shift inside her chest. She'd come to Ward Creek Ranch as a desperate outsider looking for survival. Somewhere along the way, without noticing exactly when, she'd become something else entirely. She'd become home. Spring arrived late, fighting its way through the last stubborn snowfalls of April, until finally, decisively, claiming the prairie. Evelyn stood on the porch one morning in early May, watching green push through brown earth, and felt the symbolism wasn't lost on her. Everything dead eventually made room for something new. You just had to survive the waiting. Mail came, Caleb called from inside, and she heard the strange note in his voice that made her turn quickly. He stood in the doorway holding a thick envelope, official-looking, with a Denver return address. What is it? Open it. He handed it over, and she noticed his hand trembled slightly. I think it's from the publisher. Evelyn's stomach dropped. She'd sent her manuscript to 3 publishing houses 2 months ago, expecting nothing. The silence since had been answer enough, or so she'd thought. She opened the envelope carefully, unfolding the letter inside. Dear Mrs. Ward, we are pleased to inform you that Henderson and Sons Publishing would like to offer you a contract for your manuscript. Honest Letters, a practical guide for women considering frontier marriage. Your direct, forthright approach to a delicate subject fills a significant gap in available literature for women contemplating westward migration. We propose an initial print run of 500 copies to be sold through our network of booksellers and by mail order. Enclosed, please find our standard contract terms. The words blurred. Evelyn read them again, then a third time, waiting for them to make sense. They want to publish it, she whispered. They want to publish it, Caleb repeated, grinning. Evelyn, they're going to print your book. 500 copies, that's so many. That's 500 women who will have the information you wished you'd had. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground in a rare display of exuberance. I'm so proud of you. When he set her down, she was laughing and crying simultaneously, the letter clutched in her hand like a lifeline. I can't believe this is real. Believe it. You earned this. He kissed her soundly. My wife, the published author. The words sent warmth through her chest. My wife. Not his arrangement, not his practical solution. His wife. What's all the noise? Nora appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes despite it being well past dawn. Why is everyone shouting? Evelyn's book is being published, Caleb announced. She's going to be a real author. I knew it. Nora threw her arms around Evelyn's waist. I knew people would want to read it. I told Eli, didn't I tell you? Eli emerged from the bedroom, already dressed, and nodded solemnly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a drawing. A woman sitting at a desk, pen in hand, surrounded by papers and lamplight. He'd been working on it for weeks, she realized, waiting for this moment. It's beautiful, Evelyn said, her voice thick. Thank you. The boy smiled, rare and genuine, then went to help his father with breakfast.
The contract negotiations took weeks of correspondence, but by June, everything was settled. Evelyn signed the papers with shaking hands, officially becoming a published author with a small advance that felt like a fortune. "What will you do with the money?" Caleb asked one evening. "Save it. Use it for the ranch. Whatever we need." "It's your money, Evelyn, from your work. You should spend it on something you want." She considered this. "Then I want to use it to help the women who write me, the ones who are truly desperate. Maybe create some kind of fund, small amounts to help them get established, find work, avoid bad marriages." Caleb looked at her with such tenderness it made her breath catch. "Of course you do. Of course you'd use it to help others." "Is that foolish?" "It's perfect. It's exactly who you are." He pulled her close. "Though I insist you keep some for yourself. Buy a new dress. Get those books you've been wanting, something frivolous." "I don't need frivolous." "Everyone needs frivolous sometimes, even practical frontier wives who write guidebooks." She laughed against his chest, feeling the solid reality of him, the absolute certainty that this was where she belonged. The guidebook's publication in August brought unexpected attention. The Denver newspapers ran stories about the honest bride of Dry Hollow, who was helping women navigate frontier marriage. Letters poured in, not just from prospective brides now, but from women already living the reality Evelyn had described. Women grateful to know they weren't alone in their struggles. "You should see this," Caleb said one afternoon, returning from town with a newspaper. "You're famous." The headline read, "Local author tells hard truths about Western marriage." The article quoted extensively from her book, praising its candor, while some male letter writers condemned it as discouraging women from accepting their proper roles. "They're saying I'm undermining marriage," Evelyn said, scanning the responses. "They're saying you're telling the truth, and they don't like it." Caleb set down the paper. "Let them complain. The women who need your book will find it regardless." He was right. Sales exceeded Henderson & Sons' expectations. By September, they'd ordered a second printing. By October, a third. Evelyn's small advance turned into steady royalties that, while not making them wealthy, provided genuine financial breathing room for the first time since she'd arrived. The ranch benefited. They fixed the barn properly, replaced worn equipment, bought better livestock. But more than the material improvements, something intangible had shifted. The place felt lived in again, cared for, like a house that had been holding its breath could finally exhale. In November, almost exactly a year after Evelyn's arrival, Dry Hollow held its annual harvest social. Caleb had avoided town gatherings since Anna's death, but this year he suggested they attend. "Are you sure?" Evelyn asked. "People will talk." "Let them talk. I'm tired of hiding." He took her hand. "Besides, I want to show off my brilliant wife." The social was held in the church hall, the same building where Evelyn had endured her humiliation with Thomas Garrett. Walking back in felt like closing a circle she hadn't known was incomplete. People stared when they entered. Whispers followed them across the room. But Caleb kept his hand firmly on her back, and Evelyn lifted her chin, refusing to show discomfort. Sarah Winters approached first, pulling Evelyn into a hug. "I heard about the book. I'm so proud of you." "Thank you for everything. You helped me when no one else would." "I just gave you a room. You did the rest yourself." Sarah smiled at Caleb. "She's good for you. Both of you look happier than I've seen in years." Others approached throughout the evening, some genuinely congratulatory, others clearly curious about the rejected bride who'd become a minor celebrity. Evelyn handled it all with grace, answering questions about the book, sidestepping the more intrusive inquiries about her marriage. Then Thomas Garrett appeared, red-faced and clearly several drinks in. "Well, if it isn't the famous Mrs. Ward," he said loudly enough that nearby conversations stopped. "Too good for honest work. Had to write a book instead." Caleb tensed beside her, but Evelyn touched his arm gently. "Hello, Mr. Garrett. How's your ranch?" "Fine. Running it myself, like always. Don't need some woman telling me how to live." "I wasn't offering advice to you. My book is for women, not men who treat them like unpaid labor." His face darkened. "You turned me down because you thought you were better than me." "No, I turned you down because you wanted a servant with a marriage license, and I wanted a partnership. Those aren't the same thing." She kept her voice level, aware they had an audience. "I found what I was looking for. I hope you find what you're looking for, too, Mr. Garrett, genuinely." He stared at her, jaw working like he wanted to say something cutting, then turned and stalked away. That was well handled, Caleb murmured. I've had practice with difficult men. Have you now? His eyes glinted with amusement. Present company excluded, of course. Of course? They danced later, awkwardly, because neither of them was particularly skilled, but it didn't matter. What mattered was moving together, laughing when they stepped on each other's feet, finding rhythm despite their lack of grace. I love you, Caleb said quietly as they swayed to the music. I love you too. She rested her head on his shoulder. Even when you dance like you're wrestling a fence post. That's specific criticism. I'm a writer. Specificity matters. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine, and Evelyn thought about how far they'd both come. The broken widower who could barely function. The desperate bride nobody wanted. Somehow they'd rebuilt themselves into something that worked, something real. On the way home, with the children asleep in the back of the wagon and stars scattered across the sky like spilled salt, Caleb said, I've been thinking. About? About the future. About what we want it to look like. And what do we want? I want to expand the ranch. Buy the adjacent property that's going up for sale. Make Ward Creek something we can pass down to the children. He glanced at her. And maybe to their siblings, eventually. Evelyn's heart stuttered. Siblings? If you want. No pressure. But I've been thinking about what Nora asked last year, about babies, and I think, if you're willing, I'd like to try. Not to replace the twins or because we need more help, just because I want to build a bigger family with you. Are you sure? You said after Anna I know what I said, and I meant it then, but you're not Anna, and this isn't that marriage. This is ours, and we get to decide what it looks like. He pulled the wagon to a stop, turning to face her fully. So I'm asking, do you want children with me? Evelyn thought about the life they'd built, the children they were raising, the ranch that was finally thriving. Thought about the woman she'd become, stronger, more certain, more herself than she'd ever been. Yes, she said simply, I want that. He kissed her then, deep and sure, and when they pulled apart, both of them were grinning like fools. We should probably get the children home before they wake up and catch us, Evelyn said. Probably. But he kissed her again anyway, because they could, because they'd earned this joy through hard work and honest effort, and the stubborn refusal to let grief or desperation define them. Winter came again, and spring after that, and the seasons turned in their endless cycle while life at Ward Creek Ranch continued its imperfect, beautiful rhythm. Evelyn's book sold steadily, helping women across the territories make informed choices about frontier marriage. The letters kept coming, stories of success and failure, gratitude and questions, women building lives in impossible circumstances. She answered every one, creating a network of support that spanned hundreds of miles. Some women took her advice and found good marriages. Others used her guidance to avoid bad ones. A few wrote back years later to say they'd never married at all, but had built successful businesses or found work that sustained them without needing a husband. All of it mattered. All of it counted. By the time their daughter was born in late autumn, small and fierce and perfect, Evelyn had published a second book and was working on a third. Expanded the ranch and turned it profitable. Nora, at 9, was already talking about becoming a teacher. Eli, still quiet but no longer silent, had started selling his drawings to the newspaper. They weren't perfect. They fought sometimes about money, about priorities, about how to raise the children. Caleb still had days when Anna's memory hit him like a physical blow, and Evelyn still woke sometimes from nightmares about standing rejected in Dry Hollow's dusty street. But they'd learned to weather those moments together. Learned that love wasn't the absence of difficulty, but the commitment to push through it anyway. One evening in December, 3 years after her arrival, Evelyn stood on the porch watching a stagecoach in the distance. Someone new arriving in Dry Hollow, chasing promises that might be real or might be lies. Thinking about that day? Caleb asked, joining her with the baby on his shoulder. Always. How could I not? She leaned against him. I was so scared, so convinced I'd made a terrible mistake. Had you? No. Turned out I'd made exactly the right choice. I just didn't know it yet. She smiled. That woman on that stage, whoever she is, she's probably scared too, wondering if she's making a mistake. You could write to her. Leave a letter at the boarding house, just in case. I could. Evelyn considered it. Or maybe I'll do something better. The next week, she rode into Dry Hollow and found Sarah at the boarding house. I have a proposition, Evelyn said. Any woman who arrives here for a marriage that falls through, I want you to send her to me. Not permanently, just until she finds her feet. I'll provide room and board at the ranch for a few weeks, help her figure out her options. No obligation, no judgment, just a safe place to breathe and decide what comes next. Sarah's eyes widened. Evelyn, that's incredibly generous. It's incredibly practical. I had nowhere to go. If Caleb hadn't offered me an alternative, I don't know what would have happened. She met Sarah's gaze. No woman should have to face that alone. Not if I can help. Caleb knows about this? It was his idea. Which wasn't quite true. He'd suggested helping one woman, and Evelyn had expanded it to a general policy, but close enough. We have the space, and I have the experience. It makes sense. Over the following years, Ward Creek Ranch became known as a way station for displaced brides. Not all of them stayed, most didn't, once they'd regained their footing and found work or better marriage prospects. But a few did, joining the household temporarily as hired help, saving money, building skills. Evelyn taught them bookkeeping, practical ranch management, negotiation tactics for dealing with difficult men. Some became friends. Others just needed the breathing room before moving on to their next chapter. All of them left stronger than they'd arrived. You're building something important, Caleb said one night, watching Evelyn work on correspondence with her network of women. Something that'll outlast both of us. I'm just doing what needed doing. That's what important things are. Noticing what needs doing and doing it anyway. He kissed the top of her head. I'm proud of you, in case I don't say it enough. You say it plenty. She set down her pen and turned to face him. I'm proud of us, of what we built from absolutely nothing. We had something. We had desperation and stubbornness. Fair point, she laughed. Turns out that's enough, if you're willing to work hard enough. Years passed. The children grew. Nora became a teacher exactly as she'd planned, working in the new school Dry Hollow had finally built. Eli, quieter but confident, took over ranch operations with Caleb, his art now supplementing ranch income through commissioned pieces. The baby, Margaret, named for Evelyn's mother, grew into a bright, fierce child who asked too many questions and accepted too few easy answers. 2 more children followed, spreading the family into something larger and louder, and infinitely more complicated than that original arrangement had promised. Evelyn's books continued selling. She wrote 4 more over the years, each one expanding on different aspects of frontier life for women. Publishers in New York started requesting manuscripts. Her reputation grew beyond the territories, becoming something she'd never imagined possible when she'd sat in that boarding house room calculating how many days until destitution. But the writing, the reputation, the modest fame, none of it mattered as much as the life she'd built. The family she'd created, not from blood, but from choice, from hard work, from the stubborn insistence that broken things could be mended if you cared enough to try. On a warm afternoon in late May, almost 10 years after her arrival, Evelyn stood at Anna's grave with fresh wildflowers. She'd started doing this years ago, maintaining the site, keeping it clear, making sure the children remembered the woman who'd loved them first. I hope you don't mind, she said quietly to the simple wooden cross. Me being here, me raising your children, loving your husband. The wind rustled through the grass, carrying no answers. I think you'd approve, or I hope you would. I've tried to honor your memory while building something new beside it. That's the best I could do. She placed the flowers carefully and stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. When she turned, Caleb was standing a few yards away, watching. She didn't know how long he'd been there. You all right? She asked. Yeah. He moved closer, taking her hand. I come out here sometimes. Talk to her. Tell her about the kids, about you, about everything that's happened. What do you tell her about me? That you saved us. That you're nothing like her and everything we needed. That I love you both, differently but completely, and somehow that's okay. He squeezed her fingers. And I thank her. For the children, for the years we had, for whatever cosmic accident led me to that church social the night I met you. You think that was her doing? I think grief does strange things. Makes you desperate enough to take risks you'd normally avoid. If Anna hadn't died, I never would have placed that advertisement, never would have been in town that night, never would have offered you an arrangement that turned into everything. So her death gave us life. Something like that. He pulled Evelyn close. I don't believe in fate or destiny or any of that, but I believe in making the best of what you're given. And somehow, impossibly, you and I got given each other. They stood there together, the living and the dead coexisting in the same space, and Evelyn felt the weight of everything they'd survived. The rejections and the fever, the hard winters and harder revelations, the slow, painful work of building trust when neither of them had any reason to trust again. Come on, Caleb said eventually. Kids will be wondering where we went. They walked back to the ranch hand in hand, across prairie that was finally green, past fences that were finally mended, toward a house that was finally, completely home. That evening, a letter arrived. Another woman, another desperate situation, another plea for guidance. Evelyn read it carefully, then sat down to respond with the same honesty she'd offered every woman before. Dear friend, I won't lie to you, frontier life is hard. Marriage out here can be brutal, isolating, nothing like the promises you received. But it can also be the making of you, if you're brave enough to demand honesty and strong enough to walk away from anything less. Don't accept pretty lies. Don't settle for men who see you as solutions instead of people. Don't let desperation make you small. But also, don't be afraid of unconventional arrangements. Sometimes the best marriages are the ones that start with honesty instead of romance. Sometimes rejection saves you from something worse and pushes you towards something better. Sometimes the life you build from scraps and stubbornness becomes more valuable than anything you could have planned. Trust yourself. You're stronger than you know. And if you need help, write to me. I'll tell you the truth, even when it's hard to hear. Yours, Evelyn Ward. She sealed the envelope and added it to the pile for tomorrow's mail run. Through the window, she could see Caleb teaching their youngest to ride, patient and careful. Nora was visiting from town, helping Eli frame his latest commission. Margaret was reading on the porch, her small face serious with concentration. This was her life. Built from nothing, from rejection and desperation and a stranger's honest offer. Built from hard work and harder choices and the slow accumulation of days that became years that became a lifetime. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was real, and it was hers, and that was enough. That was everything. Evelyn stood and went outside, joining her family in the golden afternoon light. Caleb looked up when she approached, his face softening in the way it only did for her. And she thought about the woman she'd been, standing in Dry Hollow's dusty street, unwanted and terrified, convinced her life was over. That woman would have never believed this was possible. The happiness, the love, the purpose she'd found in the last place she'd expected. But impossible things happened every day on the frontier. You just had to be brave enough to survive until they did. Everything all right? Caleb asked. Everything's perfect, Evelyn said. And for once, unlikely as it seemed, it actually was.